Okay, so I guess going backwards, the context is some of the implications in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, HR 1, won't really be understood maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road. A lot of the tax components and the spending components for states kick in 2028. That's fiscal year 2028, so October 1st, 2027. Um, so that's the added context for the question of um, as our starting point, how will this bill impact our work? So consider the New Deal, as Marcella said at the beginning. Um, and what are the implications, specifically, what are the implications that we know right now, not the ones that will take time to unpack, but that's our starting point. So how will this bill impact our work, and what are the implications that we know now?
Really quickly, I just want to note something you said, where you said a lot of this stuff, like the impacts won't be seen until 2028, which means into the next presidential election. And I think something that we have to be really mindful of is that this is probably specifically designed to for that to happen, so that blame goes into the next administration if it's not the current one. Because we know this is the second term, and we shouldn't have a third term, but we never know what's going to happen. And so it's going to be really easy that if we have like a pendular swing and we have like a left-leaning um, administration after this one, it's going to look like all of the implications are coming from that administration rather than being holdovers from this one, which could damage sort of like the outlook on what a more left-leaning administration looks like. But to answer your question, one of the things I'm seeing is that very big scale. The poor will get poorer, the rich will get richer, which means there's going to be a larger wealth gap, which means, and we know that when there's no real middle class, it gets really hard for us to build power. And if sources of funding start to dry up, or people begin to get really worried about funding certain transformative programs, it makes the work harder, the work that needs to get done to alleviate some of the issues. Like, it's going to be harder to do, which means less and less people will do it. And in our case, that means more young people will find themselves without housing, and they'll be without housing because they won't have educations, less access to education to gain like gainful employment, less access to safety net programming in order to help them with some of the other social determinants of like homelessness and health. So just wanted to kind of put that out there too. It's like yeah.
Yeah, and building on that one specific thing that I was tracking the whole time, the original version, and many of you have heard me say this a few times now, but for those of you who haven't, um, in the original version, when they were talking about the work requirements specific to Medicaid, there were close to 10, I don't remember the exact number, but close to 10 exempted classes, and two of those included, and I'm quoting the original text, people experiencing homelessness and youth aging out of foster care up to age 26. Those two groups were taken out of the bill that passed. And when you dig into what that means, so you have now check-ins every 6 months to keep Medicaid, and with those check-ins, you have to have your social security number and card. I got to double check the card part, but that was the one of the iterations that I saw. Um, I think that stuck because they didn't want folks who migrated here to access Medicaid. So social security card and address. And as we know, with those two specific groups that were taken out of the exemptions, you may not know the address of where you're staying when you have that check-in. You may not have your social security card. You may be working with a caseworker to get that social security card. And so now you're going to lose that your health care because you don't have those two now requirements for folks that should have been exempted.
Are there any, so for these young people, are they able to use, if they're in school, their school PO boxes, and like if they're in college, and then if they're not in college, are they able to use the Department of Social Services mailing address?
I'm unsure. Um, that's one of the implications that I don't think we fully understand yet. And once we do, I think that should be, lack of better terms, some guidance that we put out for folks in our networks. But I'm writing that down so I can look into that to answer your
Yeah,
question.
because I think that they'll still be able to. I think that other guidance would be now, because if they are on food stamps, they will have to apply each 6 months instead of each year, which is now instead of once a year, twice a year. What guidance do we need to put on that to be able to support young people in understanding that? I think the other implication, the implication I see coming out of this is like we've already got super overworked social workers who are typically the ones that are supporting young people in managing transitioning out. And so if they're having to remind them every 6 months, hey, don't forget to do, while it seems like a small task, I think we just need to be mindful of how much the caseworkers, social workers, community supports are going to have to step up on top of what there are on other things that they're going to have to step up on to try to keep those young people in. Because I mean, when you're at home, your parents are like, hey, don't forget to turn your driver's ed application in. You kind of have that. But when you're in foster care, you really don't have that unless you have an engaged social worker. So I mean, it just puts a lot of young people, the other implication is that it puts a lot of young people at risk for not being able to access those resources if they need them, because they have to rely on their worker, which we've known for years that when you have to rely on your social worker, if you don't have a social work, which we know there's a lot of social work turnover, you may not have a social worker for months on end. That might be during your application time. So those are other implications that I see coming from this, just making the process, like I said, even though it is, you've got to do it once a year versus, I mean, twice a year versus once a year. And that may seem easy, but it's not easy when it comes to young people who are already trying to gather as much information as they can already about how to transition out. And there's another thing. And this is, like I said, just one thing out of all the other implications that may arise out of these
Yeah.
changes.
Something you just said reminds me of like how the cuts are so strategic, and they're so subtle and so strategic, because like you said, if people need caseworkers and social workers in order to get certain things because of the barriers to access, and if they don't have those caseworkers, social workers, then they don't have the access. But also, what happens to the people who do have those caseworkers and social workers, but those caseworkers and social workers are inundated by a failing system and a bottleneck system, then it's like it looks from the outside like people have everything that they need, and it looks like a personal failing on their part, when really it's also the system being backed up. And again, it's the perfect like recipe for making it so that people can't get access to what they need, and that the people who are there to help stop wanting to help because it just feels like they're shouting into the vacuum, or they're just too yeah, they I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of to all of your points, right? Like I think like some of the direct implications of that we're going to see is just that we're going to see increased food insecurity, health disparities, because it's going to be harder for young people to either meet the work requirements or go to these meetings every 6 months, right? Like we know that young people don't go to don't go to meetings as frequently for various reasons, right? Like housing instability, and some of it is also just developmentally, it's not in that frontal lobe yet, like making those informed decisions. But all of that is just going to increase the number of people experiencing homelessness. I think that's a direct implication. And then even the data tracking uh, homelessness in general, I think it's going to be unreliable, right? That's another implication that like we won't be able to make informed decisions, right? Because um, there's not going to be data. I think the TAs being cut, all of this is being cut, so therefore, like it's just more work on a few people. So things are just going to get lost in the mix, right? Like that we're going to see unreliable data. We're going to see like more people entering homelessness. So all of that is just like something that like I just see from these from these cuts happening immediately.
And I mean, even and you cited like some of the things about like why it's hard to like make those meetings. Taking notes. No, hold on. I can start the AI note taker though, just because so we can be present. Okay. Oh yeah. So it's like even like you cited like developmental, like things like people who are below a certain age not being able uh have the like maturity or whatever to make these meetings, but also just talking about like how hard it is to make a physical meeting, let alone a virtual meeting when you're experiencing hardship to like some of these things are like so far beyond. And I know you're not saying that's like the main like reason. I'm also just want to make sure I'm saying the thing that's not being like said outright. It's like when you're facing like hardships or housing insecurity, how are you supposed to have access to transportation to make it to the meetings? How are you supposed to like be well enough to make it to these meetings? How are you supposed to be in a good mindset in order to show up once you physically show up to these meetings? Like again, it's subtle, insidious. And they know these things. These are not I've talked to people in the past who have said things like, well, I'm sure they didn't realize that was the case when they made these cuts in these laws. Otherwise, they would have done differently. And it's like, I unfortunately do believe that these people who were smart enough to be elected or to work in government and governance, they're smart enough to do those jobs, and they're also not reliant on just their own wits. They also have staffs of people to inform them about the implications of their work and implications of like language that's put in here. These people, if the system is not broken, it is designed to not work well so that people no longer buy into it, so that we have yet another reason to blame the people for their own barriers that they face.
And those barriers, right? Like some of them are systemic, right? And like and to your point, Aurora, like, and I'm gonna just share like my experience, like when I was I was living in my car, right? And I don't know where my social security card was, right? Like I left it somewhere in one of the various like apartments. Like I was couch surfing in some friend's apartment. I probably left it in there. And then just being able to like get a new one, I had to go to the Social Security office, which at the time was like had to go to Center City, Philadelphia, and then like I don't know, it was just like I had to then take a train, pay for the train, go get it, and then like wait. I think I had to wait like a week or two for it to come in the mail, and then be able to apply for services, right? Like, and all of that just took so much and a lot of time, right? Like, I think like, especially when I was like living out of my car didn't always have gas, right? Like, so it's like, how am I gonna get to these meetings and these like, especially like when you're in this, I was in the suburbs and like public transportation sucks, right? Like, so there's all of these like barriers that like not necessarily the fault of that person. It's just that like I don't know, just like our entire uh system is rigged, right? Like it's rigged for a certain group of people. If you're not in it, if you're not in the quote unquote like good group, then like it's just so much hard. I've heard this said a lot, right? It's expensive being homeless. And it is. Like I just remember how expensive it was to like in order to get back on my feet, right? Like that was like the hardest thing was just like getting all the documentations, going to all the meetings, going like all of that. It just like took up time, money, resources on top of like working, on top of going to school. It was just so much. And then like, um, yeah, it's expensive.
And then I also just want to put out there, like, what happens to the youth who are dependents of other people? Like, I grew up being the child of folks facing addiction, and essentially, like, whatever shortcomings or barriers my parents faced, or whatever personal shortcomings they had, I ultimately had to pay for as their dependent. And like, what does that mean? Like, what? I actually, that's all. I mean, that's really my only thought to that. It's like, what do we do about those folks who are dependents who literally don't even have the legal capabilities to fend for themselves or to apply for access to things that's needed?
The other thing I was thinking about too is I think that people are so focused on the wrong people. People are super focused, hyper focused on the people who may try to like scheme the system as opposed to people who have actually been successful. Like I got out of the foster care system, I went to college, I used food stamps. I think it was like maybe a year or two, and that really helped me be able to eat while I was in college. And from that point on, like once I started like getting paid and things like that, and like I was in my career job, which I had got my career a year before I graduated. um I didn't need food stamps anymore, and thank God I haven't needed them since. So I just think there's so much of a hyper focus on people trying to steal from the system as opposed to people actually benefiting from a system that they should be able to, because um we're all working and contributing. That's another thing that I've been frustrated hearing, is that people are not contributing. I was still working when I was getting food stamps. I was not out of work. I was still working. And so that's, for me, that has always been a requirement. Like they just increased the requirement. And so it just really goes back on what they were saying, on what a lot of people are saying. Like, yeah, lazy people need to get off. I get that. And I agree that there are some people that are milking the system. However, there are a lot of success stories, and there are a lot of people who, children included, have benefited off the system much, and because they needed to, for the time being. And I just think that, I don't know if it's that connector point for people. It may not ever happen to you, which I don't pray that. I don't think anybody does. Well, sometimes for some folks, yeah. But it's like, we're trying to ensure that you're good as well. Like if some, crisis happens to you, because all of our health is not guaranteed to us. But in the case that something were to happen, we're just trying to ensure that people have what they need, and that they don't have to die because their health went and spiraled unexpectedly, you know, because I just feel like there's such a huge divide between us and them. Oh, these people are just lazy, like, and again, who did it work for? Who has it worked for? And they're fine now. You know, like I said, I haven't been on Medicaid. I don't judge everybody who's on that either, just because I'm not on it. But I used it, got the fuck up off of it, and now I'm good. You know, like I was able to eat, I was able to have medical insurance. And then I'm also seeing people say things like, well, you don't need, somebody literally told me this the other day, y'all. Well, I can understand why they're getting rid of Medicaid. Now, this person is a Medicaid recipient too. So I'm put that context there. Well, people that are on family planning Medicaid don't need it. I'm like, can you stop trying to say that other people don't need something? Like, our country is wealthy enough to ensure that people have reproductive medical support. And the fact that they didn't even look at reproductive medical support as medical support in the first place. But these would be the same people that would be mad if people were, you know, bumping around here having kids and not taking care of them. But Medicaid actually keeps people from doing that with the family planning portion of Medicaid. It actually helps people get on birth control and have access to, you know, checkups and things like that. It's just, I don't know. I just think people are super ill educated. We know that. And I think it goes back to what Aurora was saying about how the intentionality behind the systems, but also the people that are creating the systems to do what they're doing. They do know these things and they don't care. So that's why they're trying to tell other people, hey, you know, they're trying to leech off of y'all paying y'all's taxes and stuff, and we need to stand against that, you know?
And I know we're running low on time, but I do want to ask anybody who's on this call or listening to this, what is the ethical threshold for anybody out there who thinks that like we have to get rid of Medicaid because of the fraud? Like, what is your ethical threshold? Should we be punishing the 90% because of what the 10% does? Like, and 10% is an overestimation of how much fraud there's. I've read somewhere it's like somewhere between 3 and 7% of errors and fraud in welfare recipients. And so are we really going to squabble over 3 to 10% of fraud? And then, but in order to like fix that and address that, we're willing to take it away from 100% of the people when 90% of those people actually needed it. Like, I think people are losing sight of what this actually means. Like, you can say, oh yeah, 10% is a lot. No, 90% is a lot. That's what's a lot. And somebody put it in the chat, I'd rather us talk about the people who are evading taxes, like those who are the wealthiest in our country. If people are so worried about fraud, let's talk about that, because we're worried about fraud, right?
I think the proximity between wealth and fame has people thinking that wealthy people are just good by nature. And I think that's why they're not going to do that. Because they think, oh, well, you know, Elon Musk must be responsible. Trump must be responsible, because how did they get all this money if they weren't, you know, responsible people? And I think our country has done that for a long time. Like, offer, what do we call it? Just this like moral compass. We've dished it out to people just based on their money, and then our thought about people who have money and that proximity between money and fame.
Yeah. And something about fame is that we tend to build parasocial relationships with famous people. So just like you were saying, Marcella, I think we associate money. Now we associate politics with fame and money. and
Mhm.
we associate fame and money with like being smart and good, but also media has created that parasocial relationship where we actually think we're friends with or we know these people, and we think, well, these people can't be bad because I know them, because I watch them and I have this one-sided relationship with them. And
Or are from them. And so
Yeah.
they must really be good because they care about the earth because they created an electric car. You know, they must be good because, you know, they're authentic and they're real. And people, because people do associate Trump with being honest and real, and he's just blatant. So there's got to be some like moral code there because he is so just honest and he'll just say the things. And like, when you find out not everybody who calls themselves real is a good person, world just shambles.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we're over 5 minutes, I think. And we've got, I don't know how many people are. Oh, it's me, Des, Josh, and Karan. If you all want to stay on, we'll continue this conversation. I think as we start to get our flow a little bit more, it'll continue to like produce really thorough results and things that will help us think through how we want to be strategic for this year and the coming years for our work. And
Mhm.
as you all are thinking about stuff, just make sure to write it down and bring it to our next call. Any lasting thoughts? Okay.
I just need a bio break before this next
Prepare
one.
yourselves. Yes.